Hello, hello, what is up? What is good? It is the end of the month, so as always, we are looking at the month in Weekly Shonen Jump. Happy Halloween! Talking about October 2024 this time. A relatively uneventful month for the magazine itself. There was no cancelizations, no finales, no new series starting either. But that doesn't mean that it wasn't an exciting month for the series themselves. Chapter by chapter, a lot of really cool stuff happened in a lot of series. I'm excited to share all of that with you. Let's plunge ahead into our first series, the Yokai Buster Murakami, which recently unveiled its first tankobon cover. Pretty major milestone for any series, getting enough chapters that you publish a tankobon, getting the cover out there, looking badass. This was a pretty good month for the series. I talked before how they are shifting further and further away from the kind of core premise of roasting and making fun of traditional yokai myths until they submit out of embarrassment. There was kind of some more stuff with that, kind of going back to its roots with Murakami coming up with like really incisive sort of meta commentary about these characters, but moving again further and further from just random yokai to more of like the plot structure of the series itself, looking at promotional exams for her, I always think the main character is a girl, the actual, exorcist ranking up in his exorcism standings, your traditional promotional exam. Then we had a look at the Supreme Exorcists, very fun chapter where they talked about their character archetypes and how they were too confusing. All of them were just this type. The plotting with you can't see their glasses through their glasses. So Murakami suggests some more unique and trackable archetypes for them to adopt. We were introduced to the strongest extant yokai, who turned out to be a boozing gambler drunk, who they also recruited. They're just recruiting more and more and more yokai to their side. And then the latest chapter I thought was a very fun premise where they're all hyped up about the super supreme yokai resurrecting from the grave, a pretty traditional plot point. But they decide, why don't we just destroy the grave now and prevent the resurrection happening in the first place, which I think is just very good hallmark sort of meta common sense, kind of subverting expectations by doing something that in real world logic actually makes a lot more sense than kind of following out the cliched plotline. Some funny twists with that too, the whole process of trying to just destroy this gravestone proving much harder than they anticipated. Lots of good stuff. I think this series is really hitting its stride. It's confident in building out this world and building out some kind of lore and world building, even though at the same time it's retaining its kind of gag manga roots. I think, I want to see more traditional yokai. They're doing more and more kind of original characters and original designs. But there's still hundreds of traditional Japanese yokai that they could be drawing upon and roasting. So I do kind of miss that the most core original premise has been lost, but I think they're kind of striking a good balance. It's still kind of the spirit of things. So I'll give it a B plus for the month. I think it got a B plus last month as well. Steady trucking along. Next we have A Witch A Watch, one of my favorite things in this magazine, getting an anime soon. I'm very excited for that. I think that starts in the first season of 2025. This was a very traditional month for the series. It kind of just hit its sitcom-y traditional joke structures, plot structures. Wasn't too much actual plot progression. They hinted at maybe some plot progression on some of the side characters, but not all too much happened there. Instead, we just got the basic formula of some magic spell is introduced. They have to figure out how it works. It leads to some comedic mishaps. And ultimately kind of a lesson in not trying to take advantage too much of magic. Starting with a really wacky one where everyone's clothes kept exploding. Whenever the sleeping Nico would sneeze. Another one that follows this side plot of this girl who has to prove that she is skilled in the traditional arts, trying to write haiku that would please her grandmother, but she's terrible at haiku. So instead, they have to use magic to change the grandmother's tastes so that the terrible haiku she's making suddenly seem like artistic masterpieces to the grandma, which I really, really enjoyed. I think that's like a really goofy one, and I appreciate any kind of haiku writing chapter in a comedy series. There's quite a few of them. I feel like almost every comedy series that runs for long enough is going to have a chapter about haiku. It's just somehow like a very inherently comedic thing in Japanese culture to take this super traditional poetic art form and just come up with like really stupid ones. But that was a lot of fun. And then, like I said, they hinted at some plot progression around Wolf and what's her face, the other witch that can turn into a cat, but nobody knows she can turn into a cat. And this keeps leading to comedic mishaps where they're seeing her in cat form and thinking it's just some random cat. They hadn't done one of these in a while. It's basically all the same jokes every single time where they're petting her and stuff, and she is feeling intense embarrassment as a human being being treated like a cat. But yeah, fun stuff. And then the latest chapter, I really, really enjoyed the X-ray vision spell. And I think this joke has been done before, but it's like, okay, well, if you have X-ray vision, it wouldn't be so convenient that you get just to decide magically, although it is magic. There's not an additional layer of magic where it's like, yes, the X-ray penetrates exactly as far as I would like. So this really delves into that, you know. Wouldn't you just screw up and see people's organs instead? Even if you could master it, what would it be good for? They decide to use it to try to find good pulls in TCGs, which was a lot of fun, a lot of good little TCG parodies. And then ultimately, what if you screw up and you X-ray vision things for miles around you? Which is a truly kind of scary prospect and a fun way to kind of end the chapter. So yeah, I really enjoyed that one. In general, I just really enjoy the series. It always makes me laugh. What I've noticed, two things. First off, I talked last month about how they kind of cycle through characters in a pseudo sort of arc structure where they introduce someone, you learn their backstory, they have maybe one true moment of emotional catharsis, and then they're sort of relegated back into the background to be called upon infrequently whenever there's a comedic situation that they would amplify. And last month I was like, yeah, this new witch girl that's sort of going to be Nico's companion and peer teacher, who has, you know, the TV show job, and she has her stand, and there's all sorts of comedy around her. She didn't show up at all this month. They've already moved past her. I think now that I'm becoming more aware of this, it feels more and more kind of deliberately structured and transparent when people are getting their spotlight moment and then they're relegated back to minor character. I don't think it, like, lowers my enjoyment of the series. I think that's just sort of a natural challenge in writing, like, a sitcom, is how much focus do these new side characters get. But it is interesting for me to, like, think about it in that lens and think about, could they have more elegantly transitioned her out? Could they more elegantly bring her back in? Is there elegant ways to explain her absence in situations where maybe it would make sense for her to be there, but she wouldn't have anything to really do in the plot? I don't know. It's all very interesting to me. The other thing I want to note, this series is getting pretty fan servicey, and it's getting fan servicey about the boys, which is pretty rare in Jump. But I noticed that I was thinking back to this month, there was 2 chapters where some of the side characters, the male side characters, have all of their clothes removed for some inconvenient reason. There's more male fan service than females fan service these days. This latest chapter actually, like, really subverted the idea of trying to see the dragon lady naked, and instead showed the guys naked. And I'm like, all right, equality. There's a lot of girls that read Shonen Jump too. A lot of people that are attracted to men in general. I don't know, why not? It's kind of funny to me that after all this time, Weekly Shonen Jump is finally kind of like embracing that and kind of, I mean, you could say, oh, but wasn't Toriko such a hunk? Don't people get excited when Zoro takes his shirt off? Yeah, but it's different. Now they're playing in the space of the stupid fan servicey rom-com space. Now they're setting up the contrived situations to have their clothes explode that used to only happen to Lala Delvske in To Love Ru. Now it's happening to dudes too. They've caught the curse. Very, very silly, good stuff. It gets an A plus. I think it's always gotten an A plus. It'll probably continue to get an A plus because I think this is just comedy par excellence. So Shinobi Undercover, of all the series that started last month, there were 3. This was the one that I had the lowest hopes for. I wasn't really impressed by the setup. It felt quite trite. The mashing up of action and kind of like school stuff. We've seen it many times before. It didn't seem to really be doing it in any particularly interesting way. The characters felt kind of flat. And all of that remains true this month. I didn't really have my mind changed on any of those kind of fundamental things. Instead, what they did is, after one chapter of kind of more, oh, well, we gotta win the soccer game, but I can't reveal my ninja powers, so I have to kind of write things off as an accident, which is, like, fine, but again, not super creative and not super interesting. After that, they, like, completely switched gears, and I don't know if that was, like, an editorial note, or they decided, let's just jump to the stuff that I really wanted to do, no more preamble. But the last 3 chapters of the month were just, like, high stakes, very intense ninja on ninja battles. And I was pretty impressed. The actual action in the series, when it just comes down to choreographed fights, there's kind of the Sakamoto style environmental usage, using everyday objects as tools in their fights, as weapons. It does that sort of stuff pretty well. And I think the characters are kind of more interesting in this mode as well, when they only have a few lines per chapter that are just about, like, the duties of being a ninja and what have you. Again, it's not the most creative or original thing, but it adds some weight to the fight. Like, you get the sense of they're not just fighting because of the immediate situation, but there's sort of ideologies being represented behind this battle. They're fighting to prove that their way of life is valid and superior. And that sort of stuff is interesting. Now, the actual premise of the series, where he's trying to protect this clumsy magistrate hare, seemed to be almost totally forgotten within these chapters. Like, it's mentioned, but that dynamic has not come into play. Instead, it's just really been nonstop battles, and I'm totally fine with that. I think that's a lot more entertaining a read, just because they're doing it well. And if you're doing battle shonen and you have good battles, you don't really need a hell of a lot more. Where it's going to go in the future, I have no idea. You know, this fight is wrapping up, so obviously they're going to have to transition into something else. I don't know if the character they were fighting will be a recurring villain. I mean, probably. I don't know what new threats are going to be introduced, but I encourage them to kind of just, like, keep up these good school fights and not to worry too much about, like, the rom-com aspect or the making friends aspect or whatever. I think you got to play to your strengths, and they started doing that. So we'll give it a B. I think it's a solid B this month. Me and Roboco, the other comedy par excellence in Jump, becoming one of its longest running series as other things fall away. It retains its mantle. It's not going to end anytime soon. It is not wrapping up with 4 more very silly chapters. The one thing that they do often in the series is just blatantly shill for other Shueisha products. And this one was actually an interesting one. It looks like they are making kind of manga history textbooks, where they take famous mangaka and have them write a chapter about ancient Egypt. I think that is supplemented by longer form text and explanations, but just showing you a little slice of life in ancient Egypt. And to advertise this, Bondo and his buds go back in time to ancient Egypt and encounter the Roboco of that era, which makes no sense, but whatever. They have a little historic adventure and learn a little bit about ancient Egyptian culture. That's great. That's fun on its own, and then the blatant referring to and shilling of these manga history textbooks, also very funny. That joke doesn't really get old to me, especially when they point out that the creator of Me and Roboco was not asked to create one of those textbooks. He was asked only to do this stupid ad. It was a lot of fun. Another fun, silly standalone chapter where three hot brothers move in and they all have the hots for Roboco, and she's thrown into like an Otome game, and she can't really handle it very well. Very good. It retains its role as kind of like meta commentary on Jump history, with a chapter that was made in tribute to Hunter x Hunter returning to the magazine after 2 long years. We'll talk about that later, don't worry. With a full-on chapter that parodies the Hunter exam, which was my favorite part of the series, Hunter x Hunter as well. So that was a ton of fun. I think they did a great job capturing the spirit of it. It also served as like another meta commentary chapter on the arduous process of getting published within Jump, of getting your serialization attempts in the hands of the editors. That's of course what the hunters in this Hunter exam parody are trying to do. Lots and lots of fun. And then the latest chapter was just spooky Halloween hijinks, very silly. Didn't lean into the horror as much as they do in other chapters, but enough that maybe a little kid reading it would get a spook or two. So good stuff. A solid month. I'll give it an A. Next we have Kill Blue, which is a series that I'm usually kind of down on, but it really impressed me this month. I talked about playing to your strengths. I think this series has historically done that very, very poorly. I don't think it really identified what its strengths were and was just trying shit. Very haphazardly, very inconsistently, sometimes contradictory. Attempts to be a rom-com that felt creepy, and then an action manga that felt distracted, and then some sort of multi-sport smorgasbord series where they're surfing one week and kung fu fighting the next week, and all sorts of weird characters, and then this conspiracy plot, but then also sometimes it's a Yakuza series. Blah, 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 blah. And they'll probably go back to screwing that up. They'll probably keep switching gears again and again, like some old car that is trying to lurch into drive but can't quite hit it. But this month it was relatively focused, with most of the chapters being dedicated to the horse fight between Ozu and 2 challengers. What's his name? It's not Ozu. Ozma? Anyways, I enjoyed that. I thought the action was very well depicted there. There's a good sense of speed and weight and urgency. Lots of cool maneuvers. Very good. And then it nicely transitioned from that into kind of the more slice of life stuff, which I think is the other mode that the series actually does pretty well most of the time. Oh, man. So yeah, I think... I want to say, oh, they're hitting their stride. Oh, they're figuring out what works. But it could just kind of be a fluke that in this ever-shifting genre, they've managed to hit upon the stuff that I enjoy most. But yeah. The latest chapter was a lot of fun, too. It was like a pure slice of life one, where she doesn't want people to find out that she's working at a ramen restaurant, but they're out there right in the shopping district with the ramen restaurant, decorating the streets and stuff. A lot of fun, very silly, and I think emphasized quality things about ramen. Made me want to eat ramen, and that's worth a lot of points. Plus, I brought up before that I have a theory that what's-her-face, Noren, that Noren is also an adult that got hit with the de-aging wasp as part of like a trial, and is also living as a child, just like Ozma. That can't possibly be his name. You know, Ogami. Why did I think it was like Ozma? Ogami is his name, isn't it? Anyways, I think, yeah, that'll be like the big twist of the series, that they're both actually adults. They'll both turn back into adults at the same time, and then they can have their romantic ending together and it won't be creepy anymore. It'll still kind of feel creepy because they both just pretended to be children around each other for like years, probably at that point. But whatever. I think this chapter had another clue towards that. That when she tries to disguise herself, she looks like an old school Gyaru from like the 90s. And that she thinks is like a coherent cultural figure that people will expect to see out on the street. And of course, she looks extremely suspicious and everybody sees right through it. I think that again speaks to the fact that she is actually like in her 40s or whatever. Yeah. So I like that. If my theory is correct, and I'm pretty confident in it, for various reasons, I like that they're doling out little hints like this. So I get excited when I see something that can slot into my theory, and I think that's a big part of reading ongoing manga. I think that's a big part of the fun. You have your little pet theories. You wait to see them confirmed or deconfirmed. It's great. Okay, I'll give it a B+. This is a new high watermark for the series. I think I'm excited to see if they can keep doing things that I like, or if they will just go back to things that I find stupid. Alright, HakuTaku, another one of last month's new series about two kids who want to become indie game devs. This one really resonated with me as a grown-up kid that wants to be an indie game dev, and feels like I'm constantly getting signs from the universe that I ought to do it. But that's a whole other discussion. Let's just talk about the manga. So it seems like the typical mode of this manga will not be one gigantic arc in which they work non-stop on one video game, but instead bouncing around to different opportunities to make games, with different time limits, different contexts, different goals, etc. Which I quite enjoy. I think that might actually be more interesting. As much as I love the huge catharsis that builds up in something like Bakuman, where they would have, a whole like 30 chapter arc leading up to the serialization of their new work, and then that huge moment of tension and release as the work becomes popular. Instead, this is a lot of kind of more episodic little adventures. In this month, they, in one chapter, made an entire game where the kids have to go around the neighborhood taking pictures of dogs, and then using AI, it scores the dog pictures like Pokemon Snap, and they have to find particular rare neighborhood dogs. I loved that. I think that's such a clever idea. And I think it's doable, too. Like, I think this manga, is doing a great job at actually, like, making realistically complicated games for the time limits and situations and skill levels of these kids, which is quite a feat. That's pretty easy to screw up. And it's funny because if you had written this chapter even like 3 years ago, with the current state of machine vision and stuff at that time, that would have been a huge challenge because you'd have to make like your own model and everything. But now you can use the latest ChatGPT, which can look at images and comment on them, and create a simple interface that works with the very easy-to-use ChatGPT API. And yeah, I think even I could whip up a game like this in a couple evenings. And just what fun it is, too, like leaning into this whole sort of shopping district adventure, kids coming out and playing. I like that they made a game that just kind of worked for a limited time, too. There's something sort of ephemeral about that, that the kids were excited about when they might run the game next. Lots to love, yeah. Then we had a little arc of them entering a game jam, some new characters introduced, some rivals, there was some kind of funny situations leading up to it, and then we got to see a couple examples of games that originated from that game jam. And again, it felt like, yeah, these are games that you could realistically make in the span of one game jam. The game they made at the end, which was like a block dropping game with some other kind of fun creative elements thrown in, I actually think could be pretty fun. As a big fan of block dropping games, or in this case, blocks moving sideways, which already is a kind of neat innovation, I would play this one. I would try to get good at it. I would try to work out the nuances of the mechanics. The premise itself and the aesthetic style is enough that I would be interested. So good job. I want somebody to make that real. That chapter ended with a really nice summary of their ambitions that kind of stakes out what future arcs might look like, what the overall thrust of the series might look like, trying to make an indie game that takes the world by storm, trying to make something on the level of Balatro, even though they're just a tiny amateur team, just like Balatro, just like me. No, just kidding. Or am I? It's very exciting. That was stirring for me. The visual of thinking of them winning Game of the Year with their indie game. It's a beautiful dream. I think someday an indie game will win Game of the Year at these major award shows. It's really kind of seizing a cultural moment that's very, very real, and I hope is inspiring to the kids reading Weekly Shonen Jump. So overall, yeah, I'm enjoying the series. It hasn't super gotten a hold of me emotionally yet. Neither is it like super fascinating on the level of learning about game development. So far, those have been kind of by the book. But I think there's potential. I think there could be a lot of room for this series to really become one of my favorites and truly engross me. But so far, I'll give it a B+. I think they're doing a bang-up job. Can't wait to see what's next. Now we'll talk about Astro Royale, another series kind of like Kill Blue that I just couldn't really figure out where they were going with it. Nothing was really jumping out to me as particularly unique or engrossing. But like Kill Blue, I think in this month they sort of hit a stride. And again, I've said this a few times now. I said this about Shinobi Undercover as well. If you don't got too many like plot ideas, if you don't really have anything crazy that you want to say, but you can do good fight scenes, hell, just do some good fight scenes then. And this month had some good fight scenes. It felt a little stilted because at first they had, team battle against the common enemy. And then very conveniently, as it does in Battle Shonen, everybody ended up in one-on-one battles. And, you're basically like, okay, that's going to be the next chapter. And that'll be the chapter after that. And, and then, yeah, the latest chapter, they just executed one of the one-on-one battles. Against a former pro wrestler, which was fun. They were doing wrestling moves on each other. Might have been a little tribute to Kinnikuman, which I am reading right now. I am reading through the legendary series Kinnikuman, by having a guy who's like King Neptune themed as the pro wrestler. I just happened to read the arc in Kinnikuman that involves that guy, Neptune Man. Maybe a coincidence, probably a coincidence, I don't know, but I was like, hey, maybe. You gotta pay tribute to the greats, the OG wrestling manga. So yeah, not really the most creative thing. We went to like an enemy fortress, we learned a little bit of lore, the enemy showed up, and now we are squared off in a series of one-on-one battles to complete them. But they're being brisk about it. They got a whole fight done in one chapter, for better or worse. And the fights themselves have like good choreography, cool twists, cool climaxes, good sense of emotion coursing through them, and are generally well drawn. Like, I think this leans into Wakui Sensei's unique art style, that kind of like sketchy, fluid, energetic style. I think comes out best when they're just doing fights. Basically, I just want this battle shonen to have more battles. Is that so wrong to want? Because so far the battles have been the best part. So this will get a B for the month. Good, solid stuff. The Super Psychic Policeman Shojo, another gag comedy that is really sticking to the gag comedy business. Had a pretty exciting month. A couple standalone gag adventure chapters. The rich girl that's obsessed with Shojo comes back. There's a whole chapter that I think is very funny where Chojo keeps having premonitions of stereotypical fan servicey incidents that he expects to be blamed for, which already I think is like a very funny kind of examination of what if you had telekinetic powers and everybody knew about it. Yeah, you would probably get blamed for every upskirt, every dress explosion, all these things don't even happen in real life, but it's like, if you were in a manga and you had these powers and all these manga type things were happening, yes, you would get blamed. And he doesn't want to get blamed, so he goes to great lengths to prevent these situations from happening, which is a lot of fun. We had an exciting chapter where Nao-san's grandpa came back. He's somebody who was mentioned way back in chapter 1 that his dojo was in danger because he wasn't there to protect it. So that was really cool to kind of pay off that little setup from, over a year ago. Or not over, I guess, like half a year ago. Whatever. I really love that chapter. I love the character design. I love this sort of dojo dynamic. It reminded me of Ranma. It reminded me of Takahashi Classics, this sort of kung fu comedy feel, where this character archetype of like the ancient grandmaster that's so strict and so humorless mashes up against very wacky situations. That's classic stuff. And then in the latest chapter, maybe a new arc kicks off as Inukai, pictured here, who is also obsessed with Chojo. It's like 4 characters that are obsessed with Chojo. Goes through extreme Chojo withdrawal as he is assigned a mission in another prefecture, which then escalates as he is assigned to do overseas policing, ultimately leading him to transform into some giant octopus monster. So we will see what happens with that. I think it's a hard 50-50 that this actually leads to a multi-chapter arc, which they have done in the past, or it is comically resolved in like page 1 of the next chapter, or like mentioned in a flashback or something, just as another kind of like making Inukai eat a shit sandwich that even this gigantic explosion of his love is ultimately inconsequential. But yeah, lots of fun. Give it a B+. They're still just doing fun gag manga stuff. New A's Exorcist. Not a fan of this one. That hasn't changed. A lot of the other series that I was kind of down on, I'm becoming more optimistic about. I'm starting to feel like they are engaging me a little more, but not so with New A's Exorcist. This chapter continues the very pointless training / harem arc, which has our main character bouncing between very pointless, generic, uninteresting training sequences and very pointless, uninteresting, generic, ooh, all these girls like him. Who will have the courage to confess? Who will he choose? Oops, he got into a fan servicey situation with one. Oops, now it's a fan servicey situation with the other one. The first chapter this month, definitely my least favorite chapter of the series so far. It was just excruciating, like sub harem, like you can take the worst examples of fan servicey harem rom-com in Jump, and at least those had like some purity of purpose. You were just in there for dumb laughs and boobs, whereas this series it tries to be a battle manga. It tries to make you feel. It tries to have like tearful emotional sequences and sacrifice and death and loss. And then it also has really stupid comedic setups for boob grabs. And it's like the fan service isn't even drawn well, Like, I'm not in my pervy teenager era. I don't think I'm gonna really be engaged by this stuff no matter how good it is. But I can still recognize, like, laziness when I see it. I can still recognize something that wouldn't really be titillating, even if I was 13, when I see it. I go, that was drawn on its first draft. You didn't even think about the visceral sensations you were meant to convey. Tisk, tisk. So I think it's just kind of sloppy and uninteresting on all fronts. Then we get Blessed Relief, a third plot line that engages with, the overall main plot line, the reincarnation of the Hyo, the resurrection of them. One of them comes back. He seems kind of badass and scary. At the same time, one of the people that is supposed to be helping them out and training our main character, he's going to betray them. Okay, there's like something is happening instead of just excruciatingly tedious harem nonsense, training arc nonsense. So that redeemed the month slightly, but I'm still gonna give it a D-. This is like, no, it's not doing anything for me. All I want is like change. What I look forward to in the series There's been some stuff I kind of praise in the past. Some of the like kind of top level fights where they really go crazy with kind of the effects and stuff, kind of interesting. Some of the lore stuff, potential to be interesting. But for the most part, when I'm reading this series, I'm just excited when something else happens because that means the thing that I was reading will end. That's all I hope for. And this series did not have much of that this month in this series. Bad, 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 bad. Okay, good, 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 good. Elusive Samurai in a very, very interesting place. The battle at sea that was also being waged by two conflicting god tier entities. God tier doesn't really convey it. They have the powers of gods, but at the same time, those powers are somewhat limited. That was really cool. It's very dynamic, jumping from ship to ship, the rolling waves, the feelings of sacrifice between these two shrine maidens, essentially, as they channeled these powers to control the weather, to shape the tides of the battle, quite literally. Very dynamic, in a way that the series hadn't really explored before. With that characteristic kind of interjection of the modern as our titular samurai starts surfing on a shield. It's badass. It's very fun. It wraps up in a super exciting way too. Something that I really did not expect. A dynamic that hadn't really been explored in the series before, as he makes a very shocking proposal to the enemy. Really good stuff. I thought that whole sea battle was great. And then after that, we had a very definitive, okay, this kind of moment has ended. The risk and threat has been nullified for now. What do we do next? And this is one that, again, it kind of like leans upon the historical element. That in the historical record, we know where Chojo ends up going. But here we get the fun of exploring his decision making, his thought process behind choosing one avenue or another, which I think is one of the great gifts of the series, that they can flesh that stuff out and really explore the psychology of these historical figures. Why did they make the decisions they did? And the decision that he ultimately makes is a really, really exciting one, heading back to Suwa, where the series began. Many reunions with some of the series' first characters. It was extra nostalgic for me because I just watched the anime, which covers the arcs in Suwa, and it introduces all of these characters, and now I get to see them come back in such an exciting way. I get to see how they've changed in the years since. I get to see how they'll factor into these next campaigns. The plot has never really been so simple before, too. The narration even tells us that we are heading into the final battle between two pretty major characters. And it's like, great, that's something definite that I can get hyped about. I understand the stakes. I understand the major tactics at play. I understand what they're trying to achieve. It's not that the series is, insanely confusing or anything most of the time. But it's more just that I appreciate when there is such something to really kind of hang your expectations on, I think. Whereas instead, there's a lot more ambiguity as to... well, ultimately, if he wins this battle, what does that give him? Like, why isn't conquering this territory more or less important than the territory they just conquered? It's a lot of stuff where that kind of question is a little more complex and you have to draw upon a lot of different plot lines and character arcs. Here, I think we're going to get a pretty sweet, like, tower defense arc, and I'm excited for that. So yeah, I'll give it an A for the month. I think this has just been going really well. I'm excited to see this new arc. Yeah, good stuff. I forgot to animate this one. Well, anyways, I am loving the Ultimate Exorcist Kiyoshi, as you can see here. I think this series has really, really embraced a very unique niche, which is the last thing that I would have expected to say about it. I mean, the title could not be more cliche. And then I talked about it when it first started. It seemed to be like, oh, it's subversive. Oh, there's like a comedy element. Ah, haha, the demon society is just like human society, that old chestnut. But even that sort of subversion felt like the very cliche subversion. But now it's sort of just embracing its role as like a battle manga and doing so in a way that I'm really, really enjoying. He had his exam arc. I love a good exam arc. I think this nailed all of the exam arc stuff you want to see. It included some great battles at the end. I love the battles in the series. They feel so fresh, so cool. The way all of his attacks are named after movies that I personally love. Feels so seen. And then they started escalating and building up new threats in a way that felt really natural and really exciting. Like, it didn't feel like, oh, okay, well, now very conveniently there's an even stronger enemy, but instead seeds that they had planted a long time before, little world building tidbits are getting cashed in. That to me is a very expert way of writing battle shonen. You're building world in a way that is interesting and compelling in and of itself, and then also you're subliminally, without even explicitly doing it, planting the seeds for future conflicts. And the best way to exemplify this is that they brought back some of the kind of gags, things that I thought were kind of totally inconsequential and just for sillies, from way, way back in like the first chapter. They're calling upon that stuff again. They're saying, yeah, guess what? That wasn't just a gag. This will actually have plot relevance, which I really enjoyed. And then this is a great sign of confidence, a great sign that they want to run the series for a long time. They set up that future arc, and then they were like, but guess what? That's not even what we're going to do next. There's going to be something else that's a more immediate threat next, and that will just kind of linger ominously on the horizon. And the immediate threat is really cool, too. It's a great plotline, I think, that somebody who is a rogue traitor exorcist is spreading real exorcist information through Twitter, trying to trick young, unsuspecting Chunibyo type teens into summoning real demons, just causing chaos. It feels like a very modern threat. There's a lot of really funny stuff in and around it as they meet one of these Chunibyo kids and realize that even though they're acting delusional, just coincidentally they happen to not be delusional because they got real information. Lots of fun stuff. It really impressed me this month. I hope it keeps this pace going for it. I hope it keeps coming up with great ideas like this. Very, very good stuff. Definitely like kind of the unexpected surprise of Jump in the last year. Akane-banashi, very, very dramatic stuff this month. Really transitioning away from the typical mode of the series, which is all about kind of character portraits leading into Rakugo performances. Now we're getting a lot of drama that goes above and beyond that. Her sensei Shiguma collapsing, having to be hospitalized. A crisis among schools where now the Arakawa school is inheriting the Shiguma school's pupils in a way that feels very dramatic, almost like soap opera-y, now suddenly my enemy is my teacher, but at the same time, like, makes sense. When it was explained to Akane, she really couldn't say much about it because, yeah, what is she supposed to do? Just sit on her hands while Shiguma is in the hospital? That sort of balance of both really kind of superfluous, really emotional, really intense drama, while at the same time this kind of undercurrent of just humans doing their best, of nobody acting like insanely maliciously, nobody acting against their own best interests, but everybody trying to navigate this difficult situation. It feels almost like Rakugo itself, It feels like you could make a good Rakugo story of the two senseis and the student that kind of fell in between them, and the dramatic choices they needed to make when her teacher is hospitalized, and all this stuff. It's good. And then transitioning out of this, they could have easily just had it, Akane has to do her Futsume exam, but she has all of this conflict within her, and what can she learn from Arakawa, who is her enemy, and blah, 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 blah. But no, they go in a very different direction, laying in again to this sort of transcendental drama that escapes just the world of Rakugo. And it looks like we are heading into a very substantial flashback arc of these two teachers back in the 60s when Shinjuku was a lot more rough, when they made their start as Rakugoka, in a way that I still can't quite imagine, because the point we see them at the start is very, very different than these illustrious masters of an ancient art that they are now. So I'm really excited. I'm really, really interested to see what happens. I feel like the series for a little bit, because I love the mode of it normally, because I love the depiction of Rakugo performances so much, because I love Akane as a character so much and seeing the world through her eyes, I almost expect to like this flashback arc less than I like the series in general. I think the flashback arc might actually be like a low point for me. But that's okay, because I think it overall enriches the story a lot. I think it lends so much weight and flesh to everything that's going on to explore the past like this, even if it means temporarily abandoning the things I like most about the series. So we'll see. We'll see where it goes. I'm very, very optimistic. The series has not let me down yet, even slightly. It has constantly exceeded my expectations, so I have no doubt that this arc will be a banger in its own way as well. We'll give it an S-. Alright, next we have Hima-ten. So I remember I was like, well, it's not stupid yet. You know, that was like my big praise for Hima-ten for the first few months. It's stupid now. It's crossed the bridge of no return. Well, maybe not no return, but it's crossed a very long bridge and then burned it behind it. So it's gonna have to do some serious swimming if it's gonna return to the non-stupid zone. But that's okay. You know, Weekly Shonen Jump has a long, long history of stupid fan servicey rom-coms, and now we have another one. The magazine had been without one for a little bit, and here it is. As soon as they introduced, oh, I have a Kohai that's also a model, and she has really big boobs, I was like, all right, well, that's it. And sure enough, hey, guess what? She conveniently moved here. Hey, guess what? She has a crush on you. And guess what? You're going to have to clean her house too. And so we are just in full-on harem mode. Expect chapters alternating the girls having somewhat emotional, cathartic moments, but mostly just stupid fan service interludes, with each girl in sequence over and over and over again, with no progress and no hope for progress or anything, and then maybe a fourth and fifth girl get thrown in the mix, who knows? And just sort of on and on like that until the series is canceled and we just rush into a confession in the last 5 chapters. I have seen the future, and the future is grim for Hima-ten. But it's, like, fine. I mean, the art is nice, there's some funny gags, and when they do some of these heartfelt moments, like this month had a nice chapter about what it really means to confess your feelings, and what courage means in that context, and what sort of self-actualization do you want to do before you share how you feel with someone else. And I was like, all right, this isn't bad. Like, this is not stupid. There's actual heart here. There's actual consideration for the characters. There's some actual kind of psychology and sociology on display that is not stupid. So there's moments, but the moments I think will become more and more infrequent as the great wave of fan service subsumes everything else. So, you know, we'll give it a B-. It's not in the failing grades yet. It's not in the I detest having to read this zone yet by any stretch. But it's certainly getting stupider. Alright. Blue Box I love. I have called it the best rom-com Jump has ever run. And I think that's still true. But I don't know if it's like the premise of Hima-ten has got the mangaka thinking, maybe I gotta make it stupid. But it got a little stupid this month. I'm not gonna lie. All the stuff with the side potential couples, with Ryo, his dear badminton comrade, and the girls that are interested in him, and all of the very dramatic stuff about his childhood friend getting stalked. It was a little much for me. It felt unsubtle. It felt kind of just like too direct, too convenient, It didn't really feel like it had kind of the heart of the characters in mind. It felt more kind of like an obligatory, oh, well, now he has to have a romantic arc. There were some pretty touching scenes involving it, you know, seeing him genuinely struggle about this stuff, seeing him acknowledge to himself and Taiki that he is experiencing heartbreak. It's a great line where he goes, yeah, it hurts. It hurts just as much as when I lost after taking you to Deuce in the tournament. And I was like, that's great. That's a great line. So there is good stuff. Like, it's clear the author has not forgotten his ability to write well. It just kind of lacked the nuance of the stuff involving the main couple. As I said, it just really felt obligatory, and that there wasn't really a compelling reason to be doing this now with these characters, with these feelings. Instead, it was just like, all right, well, yeah, her ex-boyfriend is like stalking and harassing her. Sure, why not? So he feels an obligation. Okay, sure, why not? And yeah, she's kind of finally getting the courage to admit to herself how she feels about him. Why now? I don't know. Just it's about time. It's about time. So we're gonna do this next. And then it got worse. The whole trapping Taiki in the gym locker or the storage room, so that he can't see Chinatsu Sensei or Senpai. Chinatsu Senpai, his girlfriend, and making lies up and stuff. It's just like lazy. It's like shoddy. And it didn't last long. They had the good sense to not like stretch this out to something truly excruciating. But instead they just sort of were like, yeah, okay, yeah, that was stupid, wasn't it? Okay, it's resolved. Never mind. They get to have a nice school festival date. It just like very unnecessary tension, forced drama, if you will. That didn't really feel like in the spirit of the series. And just the kind of like stupid, inconvenient hijinks that would beleaguer lesser rom-com for really not much of a point. Kind of like they ultimately had the sort of sweet cathartic scene of them going around their school festival anyways. They could have just had that in the beginning. Why did they have to have this like really stupid hurdle before that? But that was nice. That was kind of what I was waiting for, you know. The culture festival date is a cliche for a reason. I think they did a good job with it, finally, after kind of jerking us around about it for a while. And there was a nice sentimentality to it. I really liked the discussion of, well, when will I start to feel nostalgic for this? Because in the future, I can picture myself being nostalgic for the moment I'm in right now. Will that be a month away? Will it be a year away? Will it be only when I'm an adult? Will I look back at this and realize how precious it was? And then kind of being like, no, right now I realize how precious this is. Right now, I feel this being one of the memories that we build our lives upon. One in the gigantic stack of memories that we will create together. Beautiful sentiment. Beautiful sentiment. So it turned it around in the end, but I definitely felt like they were catching stupid disease for a little bit. That worried me. But it wasn't bad. We'll give it a B for the month. Which is definitely the lowest grade it's had so far. Just not a whole lot happening for me besides that last chapter. Hopefully the next arc is more interesting. That's all I can say. Now we'll talk about Undead Unluck. God, what a frustrating series, man. You know, reading Weekly Shonen Jump means becoming good friends with the Axe. It means knowing that a beloved series that ran for 200 chapters at its own pace, indulging in things, going on tangents, exploring things in depth, may one day be told the guillotine is dropping. It's time to wrap it up, which is clearly what happened here. I don't know how much longer the series has left. I think it's doing a good job executing on the time it has left, but things are definitely very compressed. We have a class of villains where before there was a standalone fight against one of them that lasted for like an entire arc. Pictured on this volume cover, in fact. And it was great. And I had a lot of fun with that. And I was looking forward to 9 more such battles. But no, instead, they're all going to be compressed and condensed. This chapter had like 5 transformations, and the transformations look so badass, and I wish I had time to appreciate them. I wish I had time to explore all of these fights and how our beloved heroes are challenging themselves and feeling the effects of these battles. And it's like still there. none of this stuff has gone truly, but now it's getting like one panel each. Character moments that might have gotten their own spot as the climax of a chapter are now given like a page before the next major climax happens. The pacing is just absurd, and I feel so bad because it's clearly not what the author had intended. But it's not bad either. Like I said, it's all still happening in this super compressed way. It's almost like a kind of cool new feeling where we're seeing the depth of their ideas, like how much effort they had put into characterizing all of these villains, their different forms, all of the lore around why they were designed, this grand scheme from God, the final enemy. What did it mean? What did every part of it mean? Stuff that I'm sure the author intended to kind of drip feed us over a period of maybe a year plus is now being given to us like chapter by chapter, like 18 things. And that barrage, that sort of like hyperactive, intense feeling is kind of unique. It is cool in its own way. It's like not, what we ever intended to see. It's not our ideal solution. But I think they've leaned into it. I think they've been like, okay, well, if I have to put it all in here, I'm going to put it all in here. And it's going to be insane and chaotic and almost a mess. But hey, that's what we got. So let's lean into it. Let's go as chaotic as we can. So I don't know. I'm still enjoying it. I want to have faith. It's been a hell of a ride so far. I don't think they're going to fumble the ending by any regard. I think they're going to do the best with what they've got. But man, it's just sad. It joins Toriko. It joins iShield 21. It joins... Well, there's other examples. I can't think of them right now. As series that were just fantastic, long-running Weekly Shonen Jump staples, and then kind of wavered from their position on the podium for long enough that they said, hey, guess what? You gotta get out of here. Time's up. And then ended up with an ending that might end up being... at least in those previous cases, like the most disappointing part of the whole series. When instead it should be a grand finale, a grand final climactic saga. Instead just becomes, oh, and guess what? We had all this other stuff. You're done. The speed run to the finish. They called it out literally, and that's what we're seeing here. It is what it is. I think to me this is much more tragic than Psych House, Kyokuro Necromance. As much as I love those series, as much as I wish they had a chance to get off the ground, I think it's much worse when a series does have a chance to get off the ground, does have a chance to really show its stuff, and its stuff is great, and it gets to show off so many ideas and so much potential and go in so many different directions, and then the ending is always like the worst part. Oh well, it's still good though. I'll still give it an S-. These intense battles with so many ideas stuffed into them, so much lore stuffed into them, so much character development stuffed into them. They're still great. I just wish every one of these chapters was 5 chapters. And maybe that sounds excessive, maybe that would cause other problems. Maybe that pacing would be bad in other ways, but there's just so much more there could have been. Alright, let's talk about a series that I really, really hope gets off the ground. Ichi the Witch. Of the 3 series that debuted last month, this is the one that I thought had the highest potential for sure. I love that it took place in a fantasy world, for starters. We talked about that a lot last month. And in this month, it really continued to impress me. The world building, the mix of comedy and action, the lore, the characters, the way they've developed all of these characters has just been so engrossing. Showing off all of the top level witches, just briefly, knowing that in the future we could have arcs devoted to each of them, that they could come into the fold in such an exciting way. Just really, really awesome stuff. Just the whole society of witches feels so well realized. It feels so investigated, that there's so much love and care put into it. That to me is like something I really want to see from manga, especially manga that challenges itself to be set in an actual fantasy universe, is an author that seems invested in living in that fantasy universe and thinking about every little detail of it and thinking about how it would really operate. And the series is doing that in spades. It's fantastic. Most encouraging to me is after a few more chapters of kind of setup and looking at this witch society and getting our dude established as a witch magic hunter. The first kind of proper arc kicked off, going after the Hisame magic, the shark magic. And to me, so far, it is demonstrating everything I love about good shonen arc writing. There's comedic elements. They've got kind of comedic relief character tagging along, but definitely there's a feeling of graveness that really shows the problem that this magic has caused, that they're trying to solve. There's some kind of empathetic elements where you see a kid that was displaced by this. You want to save the kid, you know? And then they set up this conflict with the big villain of the arc, which went in a couple really unexpected directions for me. He tries his traditional hunting techniques, doesn't end up working. They realize they've got to do the battle of the magic's choice, which in this case is a fashion battle. Really speaks to the creative potential of this series. It could go in so many different directions. I love the concept of him hunting magical entities as if they were just wild animals. But I like even more that isn't the end-all be-all. That's not just going to work in every single situation. I think that just speaks to unlimited creative potential for this series. They could just go in so many different directions at different times. So yeah, just doing everything right. And the artwork, oh my gosh, it hasn't diminished in quality yet. Every chapter still contains some sort of gorgeous multi-page spread. I'm loving it. I give this an A+. I think it has so much potential. I hope that it runs for a long time and can truly fulfill my expectations in exploring this world and having such varied arcs and having such great characters in an ever-expanding cast. This is one that has like hundreds of chapter potential, you know? And I don't say that lightly. I think a lot of series that start in Jump, not even because I think they're bad and they're going to get axed, but I can tell that they don't really have the ambition to run for years and years and years. And this one does, and I think we've got good reason to think that it'll get that shot. Yeah, great stuff. Moving on to another banger, Sakamoto Days, positioning itself to be one of the new pillars of Jump, I hope. The anime is coming out. Hope that gets some more fans for it. I hope they do a great job. And they're taking their time. As I said before, this is an arc that isn't kind of endgame. It's not setting up the final stakes. It's not involving even our main titular character, but instead kind of the two main side characters. That being said, it's done a great job escalating as well. I think the twists in the latest chapter especially, to make you understand how this does tie into the greater plot lines of the series in more ways than you expect. Kind of the wacky situation that our main man has gotten himself into in this spot. It's like an interesting social arc with all of this deception and all of this ESP tomfoolery and the double identities and everything. But then at the same time, it's an amazing adventure arc where they're in this prison, this unfamiliar, unreal environment. Especially this lair where every room has been completely rescaped by the prisoners to be their own kind of specialized hell that they use to ambush people as they pass through. What a crazy environment. It's so great. Before they were having like desert battle. Now they had laser hallway battle. Like what's next? Could be anything. I love it. And then, as always, as every single arc in the series is, it's just a great action arc too. We got all sorts of awesome stunts already. I think the potential for even more is super, super high. Just with the characters involved and the settings involved and all of the potential enemies that could be thrown at them. Like prison arc, it's such a great idea. Anybody from the past could crop up. Any number of new characters have an excuse to be here. You can have any crazy mofo you can think of, and then his excuse for cropping up in this arc and being a relevant threat is, yeah, they imprisoned him. He's in prison. It's great. You don't need anything more than that. My favorite stunt of the month was for sure when he blocks the laser from both sides with perfectly positioned and timed bullets. I've never seen that stunt before. even though I've seen a million movies and action shows and everything that have the laser hallway, I've never seen the idea of perfectly timing bullets to stop the lasers. It's so out of this world. It's so over the top. It looks so cool. Beautiful. That's what this series is all about, man. Coming up with just genuinely creative, genuinely never seen before action set pieces while still using the aesthetics and the tools and the settings of traditional action, going back to like John Woo, going back to, I don't know, anybody you can name. It's beautiful. It's like the ultimate tribute to action movies. I love this series. Giving this an S- as well. Okay, now it's time to get everybody mad at me. So Hunter x Hunter is back. I got caught up with it. I hadn't read since around the start of the Chimera Ants arc. So I reread the whole thing. You can hear me speak at considerable length about it in the latest manga chat video. So if you watch this and you're like, what the fuck is she talking about? I disagree. Watch that and you can see me explain in more depth my feelings around this. Because overall, I like this series. Overall, the majority of arcs I really like. And even the arcs I didn't like had stuff going on that I found interesting or compelling or whatever. All the way up until this Succession Battle arc. I do not like this arc. It is not doing anything for me. And it's like, it's just so convoluted. There are so many parallel plot lines going on, and every single one of them is itself convoluted as hell, because everything is based on super complicated Nen powers and trying to understand who knows what Nen is, and do they know what their power is, or are they just pretending, and what is their power. And then the power always ends up being, well, I can possess a body for like 15 minutes, but then I have to put my soul into a different body, and then it can't ever be something simple. It's like something that has like 18 rules. Oh, I can see 10 seconds into the present and change it. Okay, that sounds simple, but guess what? We have like a whole fucking page explaining how it works in detail. So much talking. Every single page is filled with like 800 words of very little consequence. It's all just like trying to assess somebody else's psychology and understand if they're lying about what their Nen power is, and then 3 more pages of trying to determine empirically what the Nen power might do. Just endless negotiations of trying to have audiences with other people so that you can discern some third thing. It's all like miles and miles away from being relevant to the Succession Battle itself, which in turn is miles and miles away from the actual plotline of going to the frickin' Dark Continent, which I thought was like the point of all of this and is the only part of this that sounds exciting, which in turn is still miles away from this guy. You remember this guy? He's our protagonist. This is like if Luffy disappeared for 3 years, and instead it was all about how the princes of some kingdom that we hadn't seen ever before were vying for the throne. Who cares? And it's like, I know that we're like not even supposed to care. Like, I think the only coherent way to read this arc is that it's just sort of a collection of side stories that are all vaguely themed around this idea of being bodyguards to princes that are discovering Nen powers. So it's like, oh, great, we're not supposed to care. We're supposed to just see these as like standalone inconsequential things. Okay, well, shouldn't I like feel something at least? Shouldn't I feel like that I emotionally care about anything that's happening? I don't know how the hell I'm supposed to. Because it's all just so convoluted, and it's just talking. Characters that I have no reason to care about. Talking. Even Kurapika, a character that is one of like our main cast, whose struggles and journey to reclaim the eyes of his clan was meant to be like a major plot line, and that this should involve that. It should be about him trying to get back his eyes, has spent now like 50 chapters teaching Nen class and having like 5-page soliloquies where he thinks about whether or not somebody in his class might already know what Nen is. I have become to not care about him either. him or her, whatever. They have become so irrelevant to me because they are so trapped in this pit of inconsequential politics bullshit among 14 princes. It's just, there's like so many things that if they were different I would care more, but I just don't care about any of this, and it's so excruciatingly tedious with just the same conversations happening over and over and over again. Oh, it looks like his power is the ability to manipulate somebody else's power at a distance for a limit of 1 hour. Well, that means that if he positioned himself in this room and had line of sight on that room, he could position himself to take advantage of that other prince's power for 1 hour, and his power is to take control of somebody else's body. So if he takes control of that prince and then that prince takes control of that other prince's body, that could change the negotiations between that prince and the other prince. He would be able to impersonate the other prince and claim that he knew the Nen power of a third prince. Oh my god, well that changes everything, because now that other prince might have an opportunity to assassinate a fifth prince. And now we'd only be down to 12 out of 14 princes. Oh my god, the world is shaking. And all of this, of course, is the chapter itself. It's not that event happening, it's speculating on whether or not that event could happen for 12 pages. And then another 12 pages of another such conversation happening. I'm losing my mind, man. I just want to go to the continent. I just want to see like crazy animals and fights. And do you remember Beyond? That guy was cool. He was the son of the chairman. He seemed like crazy strong. We didn't know what the hell he was going to do. He was manipulating everybody. He's got insiders. They locked him up in prison, but he might just voluntarily be in prison. Who knows how strong he is? Oh, well, let's just leave him in prison for like 50 fucking chapters. We don't need to worry about him. Oh, guess what? We get the Phantom Troop here. They're super strong. They're super cool, right? We love them. We want to see their powers. We want to see how their quest goes. We have such mixed feelings about them. Are they heroes? Are they anti-heroes? They seem like scumbags, but we're kind of empathetic to them. They had a little empathetic flashback. Well, what are they going to do? They're just going to wander fucking around on the lower decks looking for Hisoka and not finding him for like dozens of chapters and doing jack shit. Just killing like random inconsequential mooks and going, I wonder where Hisoka is. Doop-a-doop-a-doop. Oh, guess what? Beyond has a daughter, and it's like a character we saw a few times before. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of cool. What is her power? I bet it's crazy and strong and badass. No, it's like, it makes you like sign a contract to make you do something later. It's like one of 12 powers that basically just makes somebody do something. Okay, so maybe like a dozen chapters from now, when she becomes relevant again, her power will become one of like a huge chain of other powers that will somehow have some influence. Okay. And then a prince dies. So now I think we're like literally down to like 12 out of 14. Great. Let's fucking kill them all. Oh, and what about the big villain of this arc? The guy who has Kurapika's clan's eyes and is like a sadistic psychopath. Oh, well, he's learning Nen. Okay, well, that's scary. What did he do? He continued to learn Nen. Okay. Yeah, we checked in on him for like the 12th time, and the check-in was the exact same, where the guy goes, his potential is unlimited. We know! You said that the last 5 times! Do something! Can something, like, fucking happen, please? I'm losing my mind reading this. I cannot believe it's been going on for as long as it has. I cannot believe that I am not seeing any signs that it's going to wrap up anytime in the future. There is no urgency whatsoever from my man Togashi. A person who has been cruelly stricken down by injury that has limited his ability to work. An old man who knows how long he has left to complete this final great shonen masterpiece that he has put so much sweat and tears and blood and effort into. There is still so much to do, so much undiscovered, so many adventures yet to have. We have to see Gon succeed and self-actualize. We have to understand his relationship with Bing. We have to see Kyura come to terms with his family's legacy, with his own destiny. We have to see him truly walk his own path. We have to see Leo succeed as a doctor and fulfill his own dreams. We have to see a resolution of Hisoka and Gon. We have to see Kurapika finally succeed in their journey to reclaiming their family's eyes. There's so much to do. Why are we spending so many chapters on this? Why are you writing like 20,000 words about this? It's like insanity to me. It's just genuine insanity to me. I don't understand how anybody likes this, man. I'm not trying to like pee on people's parades, yuck people's yums, whatever. I just don't get it. I see people like going, oh man, Peak is back. Oh shit, Kino alert. It's like, what? What are you reading? Are you reading something besides me? I've been trying to fucking track it, dude. I'm like trying to understand this plotline. I'm looking at big fucking infographics that are like 12 pages long, showing every character's relationships. There's like 300 characters in this arc. And it like isn't adding up. There's like not a hidden insight. There's not some like hidden compelling plot line. There's not a whole bunch of clues that are like adding up to some huge twist that's gonna blow my mind. There's just not. I looked and nobody's even claiming that they are. I don't understand what people are praising about this. Okay, it's like a series of vignettes about people entrapped in this battle. That could be good, but I don't have any reason to give a shit about any of them because they're not having like emotional personal arcs. They're not going like, before this I had a family and now I'm caught up in this succession arc bullshit and I just want to make it back home to my daughter and it's like tragic. No, they're just completely fungible mooks that are bodyguards for princes that just wander around making phone calls to each other and going, hey, have you heard of this thing called Nen? They're totally like characterless. Why should I care? Oh my god. Okay. Anyways, I'm giving this a C. And you might be like, wow, you sure sounded mad. Why isn't it like a D? Well, it's like very boring and tedious and pointless. But there are things worse than that. Like Nue's Exorcist is worse than that. there's not like offensive things in it. Only contextually offensive things where I'm just like, I don't understand why they're doing this. And it's like I guess it's like some sort of like legacy thing where just seeing Togashi's artwork and seeing how he draws characters and stuff still kind of like makes me smile. And sometimes they'll show like a character I care about and I smile. Like Kurapika is on the screen and I'm like, that's my homie. I remember when you like had fights. I remember when you fought a dude from the Phantom Troop and it was like really emotionally intense and scary. I miss when you weren't just like making phone calls and making people do the leaf on the glass of water thing over and over again. So there's like some kind of like residual legacy goodwill around that. Can you imagine if the series like started now and this was like the first arc? Like no fucking chance, right? But the legacy does matter when you're kind of assessing your feelings about stuff like this. It does play into your feelings a lot. But I will say right now, this is the thing I dread reading in Jump the most. Nue's Exorcist is full of horseshit, but it's over quickly. Here I have to read essentially like a chapter from a novel, and then in the end I'm like, oh, okay, so the coins go up in value, and then eventually it gives you Nen, and a prince died. And okay, that was a good use of my time. God, something's got to give, man. Because eventually Togashi's gonna go back on hiatus, right? Like right now we're reading through a stockpile of chapters he made during the latter half-ish of the previous hiatus. So even though it's coming out weekly, probably each of these chapters took way more than a week to produce, given his health and everything. So eventually we're going to run out of this buffer and go back on hiatus. And if we go back on hiatus and we're still on this fucking ship with these fucking princes sending their envoys to each other and trying to do deals based on information, and all three mafia families are still running around on the underdecks, and the Phantom Troop is still looking for Hisoka, I'm going to scream. I'm going to like legit scream. What a waste of potential, man. Can we just fucking get to the continent already? Can Gon come back, please? Putting him on the cover in a volume where he does not appear in any chapters, man, that's cruel. That's some mean work right there. I love this dude. I loved seeing him grow. I loved seeing him fight. I loved seeing him sacrifice. I loved seeing him wrestle with his own feelings when he fought Pito. Can we just have him back, please? God, okay. Kagurabachi. You know, we talk about new pillars of jump, and it's kind of like in wrestling where there's like new guys on the come up, and then they bring back one of the old guys, one of the old champs. In this case, that is Hunter x Hunter. He comes back, and it's like, oh, he doesn't have it anymore, man. His bones are creaky, can't move like he used to, can't even sell like he used to, he can't do his old spots. But the new guys still kind of got a job to him. They still got to sell really hard when he does kind of like a lazy clothesline or something. And you're just like, man, he shouldn't have come back. This is like one of the new scrappy upstarts. This is what Jump is telling, hey, you need to fall in line behind the old heads. It's a shame because Kagurabachi is getting pretty good. I wasn't like the hugest, Kagurabachi glazer in that whole kind of mimetic first wave of it getting Western fans. Everybody was, really, really hyping it up semi-sincerely. I was like, oh, okay. Well, I mean, it's good. It's not bad, but you guys are kind of crazy. Now I think it is bit by bit growing into its potential. This latest arc, which is looking more like kind of a big saga with arcs around each of the current contractors to the Enchanted Blades and the attempts to take them out and reclaim the contract and everything. It's been pretty sweet. All of the characters they've introduced have been pretty cool, pretty compelling, pretty badass. The fight scenes have been good. They've been, I think, escalating the feeling of skill through even more intense choreography. The fight that our MC had in the Playhouse with all of the origami cranes, and that being paralleled, not just like a badass fight, but this moment of character self-realization as he's processing these feelings of this other psychopathic killer seeing him as a peer and trying to articulate what makes them different, and then that character being very fleshed out and discovered, developed as well, the way that he wants to be friends with Mr. Kagurabachi. It's cool, man. It's good stuff. The way the fight escalated alongside these sorts of moral dilemmas, the way they challenged each other, just the style and choreography of everything, so sweet. And then returning to the previously established super badass blind samurai guy, I think his name is Samura, and just showing the way he fights and all of the kind of complexities of what being a blind swordsman really entails. Normally that's sort of, it's a big trope, that's an archetype, the blind samurai who's super powerful. Normally they kind of like write off the blind aspect. It's like, oh, he can hear, so he does it just as good. But here they really explore, okay, like, well, doesn't that get screwed up by a lot of other things? Like, what if the enemy just starts like making noise over here? What if his allies show up and he can't understand who's an enemy and who's an ally by the way they fight? They're exploring these things in a really cool way, that makes them part of like the stylistic action, that makes the action all the more intense and escalated. It's been good, man. It's been good. And I like that this arc has a lot of elements. There's a lot of pieces at play, a lot of characters involved, but they're not overcomplicating it. Like, they're not making it feel like, oh, and then also this is happening. But instead, all of the elements are being introduced very naturally and in very, like, specific roles. In the latest chapter, a whole bunch of ninja that have specialized in fighting alongside the blind swordsman guy show up. And you're like, oh, okay, I'm excited to see more of these guys. I'm excited to learn about their personalities and stuff. But it's not just this whole huge open-ended additional plot element. Instead, it's like, I know what they're there for. I know kind of like the scope of what they're going to be involved in. And I'm just like excited to see that and pretty much just that. It's great. It's great. I think that's a nice contrast to the auction hall arc, where a lot of stuff was getting introduced. Oh, this factor is at play here too. This faction is showing up. What are they going to do? Oh man, well, they could do anything. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's a subtle difference, but I think it makes a big difference in terms of just kind of how flowing emotionally and you're just kind of brought along on this roller coaster without these stops and checks and stuff. Really, really good stuff. I'll give it an A for the month. I think this arc is really hitting its stride. I'm very excited to see what else happens. Yeah, good stuff, good stuff. All right, the Mission Yozakura family had its 5th anniversary this week. So I think it got the cover and a big color spread. Good for them. I'm not the biggest fan of the series, but I think it's nice to see something run for a long time in Jump and really get to explore their final arc at their own pace. They've been in this final arc for quite a while now, and I don't get any sense that it's being rushed or forced upon them or anything. And that's just a nice contrast with something like Undead Unluck or many other poor gravestones in the past. So I don't know if that was like the author's own foresight and planning, or if the editorial staff gave him a lot of leeway to just be like, yeah, take all the time you need, wrap it up, you guys are doing great. But yeah, this final arc, I can definitely praise its pacing. I can definitely praise the fact that it has spent time doing everything that it wanted to do. What I can't praise so much is the actual storytelling of this final arc. I think it's like whatever. Again, the sort of like lore and mechanics of this series I think have been like a weak point, where all of the stuff around the Yozakura bloodline and the various blooming powers and all of the different schemes to kind of wrest control of the bloodline and stuff, really none of them are at all interesting to me. And the final climactic battle kind of unfolding as just sort of like power rules, oh, well, this trumps that and that trumps this. And if you think about the specific rules of how this works, then obviously it will lose to that. It doesn't have the weight of, like, let's picture two dudes just punching each other. That would be a lot more fun, I think. And essentially, the big climactic moment seems to be that they're just, like, stalling out a fight while somebody else does something. And it's like, oh, great, okay, well, that's not really high stakes, is it? They're throwing in a few more elements, The kids are getting involved. In some sense, they're the center of everything. But they hadn't actually had too much time in the spotlight, and I kind of felt like, oh my god, are they just forgetting about the kids? But now, no, the kids are going to be heroes again, which I have mixed feelings about. I think they're very kind of annoying characters. It feels kind of like pandering in a goofy way. It's like cute core. Does very little for me. But at the same time, the prospects of what they were kind of promising as the final arc, which, as I said, is just sort of like stalling while Kyoichiro extracts their dad, I was like, that sounds really boring. So at least there's like something more to it. There's some sort of twist here. But yeah, I don't know. None of this is doing much for me. But it's not like actively bad either. I think they're just kind of like, they've set themselves up with this scenario. They've set up this final battle. They set up all the characters involved. And they're doing it. And they're like doing it fine. I don't think they came up with something all that interesting. I don't think really any of the lore and the stakes and stuff have ever been interesting. But they're not blowing it either. Like, it hasn't introduced anything else that's like really stupid or anything. So we'll give it a C. It is what it is. It seems like it's gonna end soon, which is fine by me. Curious, what comes next. Alright. Talk about RuriDragon, which only had 2 chapters this month, which is pretty typical. I talked last month about how the series I had always seen as very grounded, very down to earth, basically taking this supernatural scenario where a girl gets dragon powers, finds out she's half dragon and grows horns, and then kind of just playing out as realistically, as groundedly as possible, how would people react in this situation? How would it go over? Which I really, really enjoyed. But I think now they're going in a different direction, where I don't know if it's just they feel like that sort of tone has run its course, but it's getting weird. It's getting very weird now, in a way that I'm not like as emotionally invested in. I'm not as like, oh, this is so kind of wholesome. This is such a moving portrait of a character, blah, blah, blah. Nothing like that. It's more just I'm like fascinated. Like there is elements of that too. I certainly still feel very endeared by the characters. I still kind of feel like the whole situation is being explored in a grounded way. But now the characters are just doing weird shit. Like this month has all been about, oh well shit, the sports festival that we worked so hard on might get canceled due to rain. There's a big typhoon blowing in. Hey, Ruri, you can kind of like summon weather, right? Can you just summon the storm early and then the sports day will be cleared up because you use your dragon powers to call the storm? And she's like, okay. And they like talk to the teacher. The teacher's like, yeah, okay. And I'm like, huh? I don't know if that's like a yeah, okay situation. That's kind of like crazy, right? Because like, what if there's a sports fest right now? What if some other school has a sports fest, and you're like, well, ours is more important, so we're gonna call the typhoon now. And it's gonna fuck up your sports fest, but ours is okay. It's like, it's just like weird, man. Like suddenly it felt all so unreal. And you might be like, yeah, it's about a girl with dragon powers. Did you think it was real? Well, no. But it's like, I don't know, man. Something has shifted. The psychological realism has given way to kind of more of like a comedy logic where things are just sort of happening and being improved because it's like funny that they're so dismissive about it. It's like funny that she's suggesting doing something crazy like changing the weather and everybody's like, yeah, knock yourself out. You know? And that is funny, but it's just like more weird than funny. But yeah, I think this speaks to a lot of potential for the series, you know? When it was very grounded and realistic, there was only kind of certain directions it could go. Now it could go in any fucking direction, which is kind of neat. I also think that the prospect of seeing her summon the storm is going to be really cool and badass. Like, I'm looking forward to that. And again, that speaks to a future where these draconic elements become very cinematic and very over the top, whereas before, again, they were very down to earth and downplayed, you know. Oh, she has venomous powers. Yeah, she just kind of like puked in the hallway. Oh, she has the power of electricity and lightning. Yeah, she like zapped her classmate and he's fine, but it really scared him for a second. You know? Now it kind of seems like, oh, crazy shit might happen. Like maybe she's gonna like actually, you know, do something earth-rending or whatever. Maybe we're gonna see real dragons, you know, full-blooded dragons like her dad. Who the hell knows, man? Who the hell knows? It's good times. I'll give it an A. All right. Finally, we will talk about One Piece, which is currently on a 2-week break. So we only got 3 chapters this month, but oh man, what 3 chapters they are. As always, you can watch my full chapter reactions to see a lot more superfluous praise, and I will say, very, very accurate predictions so far in this arc. I'm kind of cooking, not 100%, but up there. I'll say this. This is what I love best in One Piece, and One Piece is my favorite manga of all time. So when it is cooking in this mode, that's just as good as manga gets for me, you know? The start of a new arc, something that had been hyped up from the earliest days of the series, you know, this journey to Elbaf, the land of giants. Holy shit. Now they're finally there. There's mysteries afoot. The crew is split up into 2 parts. We're kind of learning things out of sync. We know things that other characters don't, and we get that dramatic irony, that sense of mystery and wonderment and adventure, you know, really enjoying themselves, exploring the fun of being in the toy box world that's so much larger than them, and then exploring the true Elbaf. Just the little things like showing how treacherous it is to cross a giant scale bridge as teeny tiny little humans. Just that sense of danger, thrilling adventure, articulated so well. Brought to life in such an imaginative, visceral way. And then It's like, I talk about this a lot in the reaction videos, but it's like, Elbaf I was really, really excited for, obviously. You know, it's one of the great dreams of One Piece fans that have been reading since they were a kid. We see all these cool giants here and there throughout the series, and we know eventually we are going to their homeland. But for some reason, I don't know, I was like, well, Elbaf, it won't be like that crazy of an arc, right? It'll mostly be about like cathartic reunions and learning some lore, and there'll be some conflict, but I kind of thought it might be like Fishman Island, where the new giant pirates are disgruntled about having to be subordinates of Straw Hat, and there's some fights, but ultimately Luffy proves himself, and it's just this sort of like internal strength challenge, whatever. I was like, okay, that'll be fun. But no, it's gonna be so much crazier than that. Like, oh my god, seeing the back-to-back of seeing Loki and understanding, like, oh, this isn't like a threat that's like on the level of this arc. This is like a guy who may hold in many ways the fate of the world in his hand, just like Luffy does, just like our other top tier characters do. Introducing him in such a cool way, bringing the weight and the hype around the land of giants to bear in this moment, in this realization of the true scale of the conflict, and then cutting from that to the exterior of Elbaf, this amazing like multi-tier island with the ravaged wasteland of mountains below, and then the village above on the gigantic world tree, and the huge fucking sword stabbed through the tree. Oh my god, when I saw that sword, my mind just raced with like a million possibilities. The fact that 1,125 chapters in, they're still having such mind-boggling moments of scale, of seeing power beyond our fathoming, that still feel like new and fresh and creative. It's not just like, oh my god, that guy has a power level of 15 billion. But no, a huge fucking sword. And you're like, oh my god, dude, that's way bigger than Zoe. That's way bigger than like any of Oars or even Sanwan Battleship. Like, there's still things in the series we cannot fathom. You know, we are approaching the end game, but the end game is going to be so full of surprises, so full of things that transcend our expectations. So, I'm loving it. I'm loving it. I'm so excited for it to come back after the 2-week break. You know Oda is cooking. You know he's got a sketchbook this thick of Elbaf stuff that he has been drawing in for 20 years. Of everything from goofy giant designs to little details of what their home life would be and how the Straw Hats are going to interact with giant stuff, to everything about this potentially apocalyptic, Ragnarokic scale conflict that's going to emerge when Luffy inadvertently or deliberately and stupidly just frees Loki right away because he's like, hey, I'm the sun god, what are you talking about? And then the chaos that will ensue, the number of cards in Oda's hand that he could still play, characters showing up in this arc. Was it Shanks on the beach? We still don't know who that silhouette was. Who else could be sailing to Elbaf right now? We don't know. We get to see the giant pirates in action, the new giant pirates in action. Like, oh my god, he's cooking, dude. He's just cooking. All right, in recognition of all of that, we've given One Piece an S+ before, sometime during Egghead, where things were getting really climactic and stuff with the Gorosei, and it was all very hype. But this is beyond that. The sense of adventure at the start of a new arc, it fulfilling all of these are literally my childhood dreams, seeing Elbaf. Been reading One Piece since I was 10. This goes beyond that. So we'll give it a P-, and that's the grade one higher than S+. So hopefully let's look forward to exploring the upper end of my grading scale some more. I don't know how high it'll go yet. We just have to see. We just have to see what can impress me. Alright. This was last month's tier list. You can see it transform into this month's tier list. Another pretty good month. Got One Piece setting a new high watermark. Things shuffle around a little bit. Good stuff, good stuff. I will see you around the end of November to talk about more manga. That's all for now.